Hello, everybody. This is Andrea, and this is the continued experimental podcast from American Thinker. Again, let me assure everybody that this will not ever replace written content on American Thinker. But on a day like today, when we had so many submissions from wonderful volunteer writers, I didn't post anything. This is Sunday, so here are a few things I wanted to talk about, and let me get going. The first thing is Vice President Kamala Harris's tweet from Saturday announcing $157 million for essential needs such as food, water, shelter, protection, and sanitation for those who have been displaced. That is a lot of money, and it is so great that the government is giving that to the people of Western North Carolina. Oh, wait a minute. That's not going to the people of Western North Carolina. That's going to the people of Lebanon. And let me say something about that. Currently, America's ally, Israel, is engaged in an exquisitely targeted war against America's enemy, Hezbollah, which is responsible, along with Iran, for thousands of American deaths because Hezbollah was behind the 1983 Marine barracks bombing in Beirut, but it's also been a major terror sponsor, and it's also been one of the terror sponsors infiltrated into Iraq during the Second Gulf War. So these are truly bad people. Israel has done such a refined attack that it literally blew up pagers in their hands and pockets, and it's been pinpoint targeting their residences. It's been destroying their weapons. But America is spending $157 million on the people of Lebanon who, yes, have also been victims of Hezbollah, but they've sheltered it as well. So just so you know where the Harris-Biden administration's emotional outreach is, it's not you guys. And speaking of what's going on in North Carolina, I came across, I forget where, someone sent me a link. I first need to tell you about an it person named Riley Hurst. I honestly have no idea what biological sex Hurst is. The picture of a middle-aged person could be male or female. I learned something about Riley Hurst from LinkedIn. Because if it's neither male nor female, it's it. That is the pronoun in standard usage. It is a financial management specialist for FEMA, as well as a training director for FEMA's Pride Federal Employees Resource Group. It has been working at FEMA for almost 4 years. Before that, it worked in, I forgot to tell you, its pronouns. Its pronouns are she, jem, and amphibian. I think amphibian might be the most accurate. Anyway, before getting into FEMA, it worked for healthcare. Before that, it was a food columnist for a gay publication. And before that, it was a grants analyst for Planned Parenthood. And I leave you to wonder why people who are very unlikely to become pregnant are so obsessed with abortions. There's something profound there, aside from just hating themselves and hating humanity. It also worked for years for a gay alliance. It's written published essays about violence that comes to quote-unquote trans women of color, which means gay male prostitutes. It's written gay-themed poems. It wrote a bizarre essay about the horrors of labeling things as male and female, and that's where it seems to self-identify as a so-called trans woman. It was thrilled by the silly pink pussy hats that the feminists suddenly started wearing when Donald Trump was inaugurated. And it proudly worked on a lawsuit to hide the identity of HIV-positive blood donors. It is a hardcore activist, this Riley Hurst. And someone dug up some video of Riley Hurst. The video comes from a training video and a program that Riley Hurst did, and I think the program relates to what happened in Western North Carolina. And I will simply read you what Riley Hurst said. It's actually a little hard to listen to the audio, and here's the transcript of this snippet. And then there are concerns when it comes to resources for people affected by natural disasters. I'm sorry, let me back up. My notes are unclear. What it's talking about is people affected by natural disasters. And the first phrase, being a migrant trans woman, Riley Hurst is talking about a migrant trans woman caught up in a natural disaster. So let me begin. Being a migrant trans woman, there is an undocumented concern. There's also concern of whether they would trust the people, places that are offering shelter that are faith-based because of the way they've been responded to in the past, and if they are accepted, what would happen in terms of misgendering, in terms of bedrooms and bathrooms, etc. And then in addition, public safety once they're inside from those who are actually sheltering with them. All those concerns are real, end quote. In other words, Riley Hurst is not concerned about people caught up in a natural disaster. Riley Hurst does not admire volunteer organizations that step in where the government cannot or help or fails to help. Riley Hurst is concerned that an illegal alien who is mentally ill and thinks that he is a woman might find himself barred from women's bedrooms and restrooms in a shelter. And I want you to switch over and think about other people who might be concerned, which is women and young children in shelters who have to share bedrooms and bathrooms with mentally ill men. It's kind of a two-way thing, and especially with mentally ill men who have no right to be in this country. Anyway, food for thought. I want to also talk about the media's manipulative use of euphemisms. Today is Sunday. When you hear this podcast, it'll be October 7th, the 1-year anniversary of when thousands of Hamas soldiers and their hangers-on, including people from UNRWA, meaning UN people, swarmed across the border between Gaza and Israel and slaughtered horribly, sadistically, with unbelievable brutality, 1,400 people, including babies whom they beheaded, children, women whom they raped and savaged, as Attila the Hun's soldiers would have been horrified by what they did. In addition, they kidnapped over 250 people, 100 of whom still, if they are alive, remain in captivity. And the Chicago Sun-Times reports on a planned gathering by pro-Hamas people in Chicago. And the headline from the Chicago Sun-Times, which I believe is ostensibly the more conservative paper, is the main headline is Gold Coast protests marks 1 year since start of Gaza fighting. And so these people who are celebrating a massacre, the paper refers to it as the Gaza fighting. Well, Israel didn't invade Gaza until sometime after the massacre. There was no Gaza fighting on October 7th. There was simply a massacre of civilians. So it's one thing for the Hamas supporters to call it Gaza fighting, but for the Chicago Sun-Times to engage in that euphemism is obscene. Next slide. This is from CBS News. There was an amazing story. A Yazidi girl, you remember that, when ISIS rampaged through Iraq and slaughtered the men and kidnapped women and children and sold them into sexual slavery and brutalized them. And this young woman a decade ago was 11 years old, and the Yazidi seized her, sexualized her, brutalized her, sold her to Hamas, which tells you who Hamas is, and she got rescued by the Israeli troops. I mean, this is an amazing story of a moral army liberating a sex slave who'd been held for a decade, first by ISIS and then in Gaza. And how does CBS News report it? The headline is Yazidi woman kidnapped by ISIS in Iraq escapes from Gaza a decade later. But here's the first paragraph. A Yazidi woman kidnapped from her home by ISIS terrorists in Iraq when she was just 11 years old has been reunited with her family after years stranded in the Hamas-ruled Gaza Strip. Stranded. Now, there is a bright side to that lovely word stranded. When she was a sex slave and probably also used for ordinary household slave labor. Reparations are dead. White guilt is dead. white privilege is over. Everything's over, because under the CBS standards, which are the standards of the Democrat Party, being kidnapped and denied all free will and liberty is no longer slavery. It's just being stranded. The Africans brought to America in the 18th and 19th centuries weren't slaves. They were stranded. And stranded people, not being slaves, aren't a special class with special privilege, as in special demands, special interests, special identities. They were just stranded. So, the people who are now demanding reparations and affirmative action and going on and on about things, you're not descendants of slaves. You're just stranded. No biggie. Here's one for you to think about. We constantly are being urged by our betters to get used to eating bugs. And it looks as if the federal government is helping this. It's a headline from the Epoch Times, which did an in-depth special report. Dozens of meat processing plants are expected to shut down under new EPA rules, which will make prices skyrocketed and lead to shortages. So what they say is an Environmental Protection Agency proposal is it's expected to put some meat processors out of business, resulting in potential job losses and supply chain disruptions. The EPA announced a proposed rule change governing effluent or wastewater limits for meat and poultry processors in January of this year, followed by public comment in the spring. The agency's final rule will go into effect in August 2025. The proposal has met with opposition from dozens of states, industry stakeholders, and policy experts who fear it will harm the industry, the food supply, and consumers. So I'll stop the quoting there. We don't want our waterways polluted. You don't have to believe in climate change to be opposed to pollution. In the 60s, America, rivers were on fire, things were nasty, skies were orange with smog. But so part of me is thinking, well, we don't want effluviants from these massive stockyards running into waterways and everything. But I'm going to continue to quote, the proposed changes are spurred by lawsuits filed by a coalition of 13 environmental organizations. In 2019, the groups challenged the Trump administration under the Clean Water Act for not updating aging water pollution control standards for slaughterhouses and meat processing plants, end quote. Now, I am not aware that, again, it's not the 60s, that American waterways have been overwhelmed by processing plant effluvia. Yes, things should be nice and clean. Yes, we don't want to despoil our environment. Yes, 13 environmental organizations sounds to me without anything more, and I don't have access to the Epoch Times premium report, but on its face, let's just say I am suspicious that these groups are activists about more than just clean water, and they want us to eat the bugs. Speaking of beasties and bug eating, I just love this. I'll close with it. It is a headline from SF Gate, which is a spin-off of the venerable San Francisco Chronicle, a once kind of ordinary paper that's now a left-wing paper, and SF Gate is a more left-wing spin-off. But anyway, I love the headline. Invasive 20-pound rodents continue to spread in the Bay Area. These are nutria, and they really are very damaging. They have huge litters, and they eat everything, and they will despoil an area. But I think it's poetic justice that the Bay Area is being attacked by giant rats. And on that note, thank you for listening.